And yet another update to talk about, Final Cut Pro 11.1. And while this is more or less another incremental workflow update, there are once again a few seemingly small but very interesting changes and improvements. Hey, and if you like what you see and enjoy my videos in general, give us a like and even subscribe for future videos. It really helps the channel. And just so you know, version 11.1 requires macOS 14.6 or later, unless you want to use Image Playground, which we are going to talk about, which requires macOS Sequoia 15.2 or later on Mac models with Apple Silicon. Beyond that, we want to cover movable markers, new shortcuts, titles, and more. But first off, the biggest improvement and addition, new so-called adjustment clips, not layers. And while you might be thinking, so I've had and been using them for ages, well, if you've downloaded an adjustment layer from any of the endless sources out there, or even made your own, then you'll already have a good idea what these are all about. While the new adjustment clips on the surface are the same, there are some very key differences and advantages. So let's dive in. If you've used an adjustment layer in the past, you'll already know what an adjustment clip is all about. An adjustment layer is nothing but a title from Motion, easily recognized by the fact that it's assigned the purple title role, only with nothing in it but the title background layer. Anything you apply to this as far as effects or transformations are concerned affect any and all clips below it. But maybe some of you have seen this in the past yourself. You open a project and the adjustment layer has gone offline. That can either be because you downloaded a different one in the meantime, or maybe you got it from someone else who was using their own that you obviously don't have. Well, this is a thing of the past, thanks to the fact that it is now a built-in feature. In this case, I can simply select it, hit Command-C to copy it, hit X to set a clip range, and now add the new adjustment clip, which you can find towards the bottom of the Edit menu, or you can add it by simply hitting the shortcut Option A. And as I've pointed out many times in the past with previous updates, if you are using a custom keyboard command set, then you will not see this or any other new keyboard shortcut. So you either have to hit Option Command K to open the command editor and assign one yourself, or simply switch back to the default command set. I'll just hit Option A to connect an adjustment clip across the duration of my range. Now I can select the adjustment clip and press Option Command V to paste whatever effects or transformations, etc. were applied to the offline adjustment layer. Now I can delete the old one and can be sure that it will never go offline, even if I send it to someone, as long as they have Final Cut Pro 11.1 or later. Nice. In this project, I have a simple clip with an interview where the gentleman counts 4 things that he thinks are important, to which I would like to apply a color correction and also experiment a bit with accentuating his countdown. Again, I'll hit X to set a clip range and press Option A again to connect an adjustment clip. Now I'll apply a color adjustment filter to it and make some very obvious changes. I could also apply some transformations to the same adjustment clip to scale the clip up every time he lists the next item. But on the one hand, I don't really want to have to fiddle with keyframes, and on the other, I want to take advantage of 2 things that are both supremely unique to Final Cut as well as to the new adjustment clip. Which leads me to the very key differences and advantages of adjustment clips that I mentioned in my opening. You probably noticed that the adjustment clip has a different sort of red-pinkish roll color, not the purple of a title. That's because adjustment clips aren't titles, but rather have their own video roll. So how is that helpful and an advantage? Well, the most obvious is that if we open the index window and go to the Roles tab, we can see the adjustment clips role at the top of the list. And as with all the other roles, this allows me to activate and deactivate any and all of the media that has this role assigned to it. Therefore, if I have multiple adjustment clips in my project, simply clicking the checkbox for the role deactivates any and all adjustment clips that I may have used. But on top of that, that also means that I have the ability, as with any other role, to create sub-roles as well. So before I add any transformations, I can either click the Edit Roles button at the bottom of the index window, or right-click any media in the timeline, such as the adjustment clip itself, and go to Assign Video Roles, and then Edit Roles. Moving my mouse over the adjustment clip role exposes a plus sub-role button. Clicking it creates a new sub-role for adjustment clips. I'll name the first one Color, and then create a second, calling it Transformations, a third one, and call it Timecode, and clip Apply. I could, of course, add yet another one and call it FX if I wanted to be able to easily turn off any filters that I applied with an adjustment clip. And now I think you can probably guess what I want to do. Back in my timeline, I can right-click the adjustment clip that I just created and applied a color correction to, go to Assign Video Roles, and select my Color subrole. But before I apply any transformations via an adjustment clip, I want to use yet another very unique, super useful, and I'm pretty sure very much underused feature of Final Cut Pro, because maybe I want to version the changes I am making to the clip and would like a quick and easy way of cycling through any changes. Maybe I want an optional look, add some transformations, some effects audio, an effect, and a timecode generator for a version I want to give to my client for review. But again, I want a quick and easy option to manage each change, and that's where Auditions come into play. If we look under the Clip menu and the submenu Audition, with the clip in the timeline selected, we can see that there is a Duplicate as Audition command with the shortcut Option Y. Let's remember that and use it in just a second. Playing through the clip, I figure I might want a slightly different, more dramatic color correction, as well as play with a scaling effect to emphasize his counting. So I simply select the clip and press Option Y, which duplicates the clip as an audition, as I can see by the now spotlight icon at the top left of the clip. I'll select the existing adjustment clip and go back to the color adjustments and make some obvious changes. And with that, I already have two versions with different color corrections, because by duplicating the clip as an audition, I am also duplicating anything that is connected to the clip. So in this case, the adjustment clip with its previous color correction. To show this, I can click either on the little spotlight icon to cycle through the existing auditions by clicking on them, or right-click the audition, go to the Audition submenu, where I now have Next Pick and Previous Pick options with the keyboard shortcuts Control-Option-Left and right arrow. Pressing either shortcut cycles the clip through the existing auditions, and with that, from color correction to color correction. Now, I want to scale up the clip with every count, but again, don't want to have to fiddle with keyframes, which I would have to do if I use the same adjustment clip. So I'll go to where he lists his first item, which I can see in the audio waveform, and press Option A to create a new adjustment clip here. Now I can go to the adjustment clip's transformations and scale the clip by 10% and adjust the position as needed. Now, I'll right-click the second adjustment clip and assign the transformation subrole to it. I could repeat the whole thing for each list item going by the waveform, but I could do it much easier by simply option-dragging the existing adjustment clip with the transformation and positioning it at the beginning of the second count according to the waveform. And I can repeat this for the third and fourth list item as well, because by stacking the adjustment clips, the changes are compounded, meaning that the 10% scale and the repositioning are added to each previous 10% and repositioning. Now all I have to do is select all four, move the playhead to the end of the clip, and press Option right bracket to trim the end of them to the length of the clip. Let's preview.
Events sind Information, Emotion, Aktion und Motivation.
Not bad, and it was super quick and easy. Now, just for fun, I'd like to add some sound effects to each scale. So once again, I will select the clip and press Option Y. Now I'll take a bit of a silly sound effect and connect to each instance of the scale. Let's take a listen.
Information, Emotion, Aktion und Motivation.
Cool. Now, last but not least, I want to add a last adjustment clip, but this time across the entire project that has the timecode effect applied to it. First, I'll mark a clip range with I and O to mark the duration I'd like for the adjustment clip, but this time I'll use a little-known trick. Because if you first select any effect in the effects browser and then press Option A, then the adjustment clip is created, the effect is applied to the adjustment clip, and the adjustment clip is named after the effect that you had selected. And you can do this with any video effect, of course, for example, any of the color grading presets. Unfortunately, this doesn't go for audio effects. Adding one to an adjustment clip has no effect on the audio below it. Nevertheless, yet another very cool and smart feature. I'll undo those last ones. Now I can select my adjustment clip with the timecode filter and adjust the parameters to my liking. And even though the adjustment clip has the right name already, I'll still assign it the timecode subrole for reasons you'll see in just a second. A timecode overlay is something that I would add for a version for my client for frame-accurate feedback, for example. Perfect. Now I can cycle through any and every version that I have come up with the Control, Option, and the left and right arrows to literally audition which version I or my client like the best. The timecode adjustment clip never goes away because it is not connected to my audition. And if I decide on any particular version, I can once again right-click the clip, go to the Audition submenu, and choose Finalize Audition. Now you might be asking, why would I go to all this trouble with the subroles when I can just switch things on and off manually in the timeline or index as needed, or just rename the clips accordingly? Well, the former entails knowing exactly where everything is and remembering to turn it on or off before you export the final project. In this case, of course, super easy because there is just one clip to worry about. But what if you have a massively complex timeline with adjustment clips scattered everywhere? Can you even remember what adjustment clip does what? Maybe you want to keep your effects and transformations, but remove all the color corrections because you want to send it to a colorist for final grading, for example. Well, that's where the brilliance of roles and Final Cut Pro's export options come into play. On the one hand, I can go into the Clip Appearance menu above the timeline, and here I can activate the display of clip roles, and if I want to, I could even turn off the clip name for even more clarity. Once I've done that and look in the timeline, I can see exactly what each adjustment clip does, thanks to my assigning of subroles. In addition to that, if I choose Export File from the Share menu and then go to the Roles tab, then select Multi-Track QuickTime Movie from the Export Roles menu, and I'm given the option to remove and add any and all roles and subroles for export. Here I could remove all adjustment clips for exporting, or say, for example, I want the version I talked about with everything but the color corrections and timecode, but without the tedious task of having to make multiple versions of the same edit or going in and deactivating individual adjustment clips, to then maybe forgetting to activate them again for the next export or missing the one or other altogether. Well, all I need to do is remove the entire adjustment clips role, and then I can click on the Add Role pop-up menu at the top right and add just the transformation subrole. With that, I can be sure that my project will export exactly as I wanted without having to mess around in the project itself. And if this is something I want to make a habit of, which I think I actually will, I can even save the role configuration as a preset in the Roles As menu. Name it Transformations Only, or Only Color, if that's what I decided on, or whatever else, for quick one-click configuration in the future. By the way, in this example, I also added some numbered titles. But playing it back, we can see that the titles don't scale with the video. If I wanted that, I could use the new feature that was introduced with Final Cut Pro 11 by selecting the titles and then pressing Option and the down arrow a few times to move them below the primary storyline, then press Option arrow up to move them above the clip, but below my adjustment clips. With that, the numbered titles scale along with the video below. Doing this saves me having to create a compound clip or applying the same animation to the titles. And finally, for what it's worth, I keep hearing that you can also add transitions, such as a crossfade or wipe, to adjustment clips, unlike previous adjustment layers. And yes, as you can see here, adding a transition would actually only result in a hard cut between the two in previous versions of Final Cut. So, while it's true that you can now transition between adjustment clips with the expected result, you actually can do the exact same with the old adjustment layers now too. Therefore, Apple clearly changed something under the hood that affects both and allows for the new functionality. Let me know what you think of the adjustment clips or even the update in general down in the comments. Would love to hear from you. Moving on to something I'm pretty sure many have wished and asked for: movable markers. And while you could always move markers in general, it was a rather tedious multi-step task if you wanted to move them further than just a few frames. You could place your playhead over the marker and then, as you can see in the Mark and then Markers submenu, use the shortcuts Control comma to nudge the marker to the left and Control period to nudge the marker to the right by 1 frame. Or you could right-click the marker, select Cut, go to the position you wanted it, even on a different clip, and hit Command V to paste it at that position. Again, something you can still do. What has been added is the ability to simply click and drag the marker itself to any other position. Unfortunately, though, only within the confines of the same clip. Very unfortunate and limiting, actually, so I'm hoping that changes in the future, so that you can even drag it to a different clip if you like. If you agree, maybe go to the feedback page and request it, as I have also. One more small change is that you can now delete a marker simply by dragging it upward. Doing that reveals a remove badge, and once you let go, the marker is deleted. Unfortunately, without the classic, what I call cheesy poof animation and sound, as seen in some places in the Finder and, ironically, in Motion when you delete a marker. Oh well, the end of an era, I guess. As a couple of versions ago, we were given the long-awaited ability to rename video effects, but even then I noticed that audio effects could not be renamed, which I thought was a bit odd. Well, that has been alleviated, and you can double-click the name of any given audio effect and rename it to your heart's desire now as well. And speaking of audio, a new and very elaborate audio filter has been added. The same that was added to Logic Pro 11.1, the Quantec Room Simulator, or QRS for short. You can find it in the Spaces category under the audio filters. I'm not going to explain any great detail of this filter, only that it is very cool for what is meant for room simulation. If this is something that is of interest and relevance to you, I highly suggest looking for one of the many detailed and comprehensive tutorials for it here on YouTube. All I can say is if you click on the logo in the Advanced Effect Editor UI, you can get a little history lesson on everything you could possibly want to know about it. The TLDR is that it started as hardware in 1982 from a German inventor, Wolfgang Buchleitner. It's extremely elaborate and now available for both Final Cut and Logic Pro, making for an even tighter compatibility between the two apps when sending things back and forth. Another small oversight that I noticed with Final Cut Pro 11 when the magnetic mask was introduced was the fact that if you right-clicked a clip to show one of the 3 editors, Tracker, Cinematic, or Magnetic Mask, the Magnetic Mask editor was the only one missing a shortcut. Well, that has changed too. The shortcut for showing the Magnetic Mask editor is Control-Option-Command-M. Also, as a small improvement, if I apply a magnetic mask to a clip, the Magnetic Mask editor is automatically exposed in the timeline above the clip. But until now, if I removed the magnetic mask from the clip, the magnetic mask editor would still stay open in the timeline. But now, once I delete the magnetic mask, the editor is also closed in the timeline. It's the little things in life. Another very welcome change for users of synchronized or multicam clips is the ability to view the source of a multicam camera position or that of a synchronized clip in the overview. Meaning that until now, if you had a multicam or a synchronized clip in your project and pressed Shift F to reveal it in the event browser, that's where the process ended. In other words, with a multicam clip, if I position the playhead over it in the timeline and press Shift F, the multicam clip itself is revealed in the event browser, and it even switches to the relevant active camera. But if I wanted to do something with the source clip, I could try double-clicking the multicam clip to open it, which opens it with the playhead position at that exact time. That is, of course, assuming that I didn't actually skim to a different position in the clip while double-clicking. But even then, if I had a massive amount of camera angles, such as in this case, I still had to look, possibly even guess, at which was the source clip I'm looking for. But now, with both a multicam as well as synchronized clip, if I hit Shift F from the timeline and hit Shift F again, after it's revealed in the event browser, the source clip from the clip is revealed to me in the event browser. Now, if I wanted or needed to, I could, for example, just hit Option R to replace from start the synchronized or, in this case, multicam clip camera angle with its original source, effectively flattening the multicam clip in this position. Or I could press Q to connect the original source above its multicam counterpart, should I want to make some adjustments just to this particular angle at this point in the video, for example. Again, a seemingly small, but also extremely helpful improvement. Then there is a batch of new, very clever and useful titles and transitions, as well as the amount of color grading presets, having gone from 47 to 59 in Final Cut 11, and now up to 71 in 11.1. Anyone that saw my video on the new effects and transitions that were added to version 11 will be very familiar with the handling of some of the new titles and transitions, since they pretty much use the exact same very clever techniques for customization. In the title section, there are altogether 9 additional sets of title themes, which actually look really nice and are a welcome addition. As far as customization is concerned, if we look at one of the sliding box titles and connect it to one of my clips, as I said, the customization options, or rather the on-screen controls, are virtually identical to the previously introduced callout and picture-in-picture effects and various new transitions that I showed on my last video. You have position and scale controls via this control element with a circle, as well as the same framing box that behaves just as I showed in my last video, including the ability to hold the Option key to scale it from the center, as well as holding the Shift key to retain the aspect ratio of the box, as well as holding both to scale from the middle and retain the aspect ratio at the same time, making it very flexible and customizable. And also looking in the dynamic transitions category, you'll see that a few of the new titles also have stylistically matching transitions, such as expressive, gallery, and others. Just to squeeze in the one big change and improvement that Compressor has gotten with version 5.10, the ability to transcode any given clip from its native frame rate to any one of the new supported frame rates in Final Cut Pro, meaning 90, 100, or even 120 frames per second. For that, you simply import any given clip or even send a project from Final Cut Pro to Compressor, apply whichever preset you would like to use, select the preset in the Jobs panel, go to the Video tab, and here you can set your desired frame rate to the aforementioned 90, 100, or 120. Of course, the essential part of doing this is going down to the bottom of the video settings to the Quality section, and under the Retiming Quality pop-up, selecting Best. With this, Compressor now uses the same bidirectional optical flow algorithm based on machine learning, resulting in reduced artifacts and better occlusion handling. Something that requires a Mac with Apple Silicon, by the way. The instances where I can see this being especially useful is, for example, if you have a clip that you know that you want to reduce in speed more often in a project and don't want to have to wait for the optical flow analysis and render every time you do. With this, you can simply render out the clip with the full 120 frames per second and have maximum retiming flexibility later in Final Cut Pro. As far as the rendering quality is concerned, I was unable to see a significant difference between doing it with Compressor or directly in Final Cut Pro. Here I have a clip in its original 25 frames per second next to its 120 frames per second render from Compressor. Selecting the 120 frame per second clip, going into the retime menu under the viewer and selecting automatic speed, slows it down to 21% to match the 25 frames per second of the project. Playing it back, we can see I don't need an analysis or even need to render to get a nice smooth slow-mo. Now selecting the original and giving it a custom speed of 21% as well, and then setting its video quality to machine learning, letting it analyze, and then rendering it. Playing them back, we can see both clips playing back with the same smooth slow motion with, as I've said, no discernible difference in quality. Both struggle almost identically when the kid is very close to the camera, but these types of temporal artifacts are always likely with such an extreme reduction in speed. The other possible application could be for projects that are meant to be played back on an Apple Vision Pro, for example, where frame rates between 90 and 120 are commonplace. Transcoding to the higher frame rates makes for a much more pleasant viewing experience in that case. In this example, I have the original next to a 90 frames per second render of itself in a 90 frames per second project. A single step through the clips with the right arrow key, you can easily see that the original only updates 3 to 4 frames, 3.6 to be exact. The 90 frame per second clip obviously updates with every frame. To be fair, you could select the original and go into the inspector to the rate conform section and set it to machine learning here as well. Again, let it analyze and render, and you will have effectively the identical result, but again, at the expense of large analysis files filling up your library. Just something to consider. By the way, I've also seen comparisons to Topaz, Resolve, and others, and Compressor beat each and every one not only in quality, but even more so in speed, taking minutes, while others literally took over an hour. Last but not least, the only new feature that requires macOS Sequoia 15.2 or later, the ability to import AI-generated images from Apple Image Playground. The, shall we say, interesting app from Apple that is installed with the aforementioned Sequoia 15.2 or later. Okay, so I guess this is fun? While I'm not too sure about the wider scope of usefulness, you can simply go to File, Import, Image Playground, or hit Option Shift P. Or, as of version 11.1, if you click on the Import button at the top left, it doesn't automatically open the regular media import window anymore, but rather gives you the option to either import media or open Image Playground to generate and import an image from there. I'll select it and open the Image Playground app. With it open, you can now start putting together your image by selecting backgrounds and props from the options along the bottom, for example, like a helmet in front of fireworks with a flower crown. Or you can add a prompt to describe what you want. Maybe a plate of spaghetti. With the Style button at the bottom, you can decide if you want the image in an animation, illustration, or sketch style. If you want to add a person, you can click on the Person button, where you'll find everyone that you have identified in your Photos app, or you can click on Appearance, where you can choose from a random generic person with any of 5 skin tones. And while this is all fun to play around with, and I suggest you fiddle with it for a while to see what and how it does, I'm going to use the last button at the bottom right. Here you can choose a specific photo from your photos library, take a photo with your computer's camera, or choose any photo as the basis for your image generation. This can include a person, a pet, nature, or even food. I'm going to choose a file and navigate to my desktop where I saved a still image of the gentleman in my video and select it. It's loaded into Image Playground and obviously recognizes that I want some version of the person in the image. I'll just pretend that this is for a cooking show and give him a chef's hat. And enter a prompt to have him eating spaghetti. The first image is generated, and I can flip through alternatives to the right and even change the style to get some other stylistic options. But I think I'll just leave it on animation. Assuming I like what I see, I can simply click Done. The window closes, and the image that I chose is rendered and automatically imported into my event. And this is, in my opinion, the point where the limits of the whole thing rears its head. Because aside from the fact that the aspect ratio is 1:1, in other words, square, if I select it in the event, we can see that it is a whopping resolution of 1024 by 1024. So even using one of these images full screen in an HD project is probably not something I will be doing anytime soon. But oh well, we can use a selection of it for something else. I select it and hit Q to connect it to my timeline. Now I'll apply the magnetic mask, make a selection around him, and analyze. Because for some reason at this point, the mask is ignored if you don't analyze the image in its entirety. After it's finished, I'll go into the Social Titles category, select the lower third News with Logo title, and hit Q to connect it at the playhead. Selecting the title in the timeline and going into the Titles Inspector, I can now click the Drop Zone Well and click my newly generated and masked image to add it to the title and click Apply Clip. Now I have a nice cartoon version of my interviewee in his lower third, and I can double-click the image in the title to resize and reposition as I need. After which I can delete the original image from my timeline. And oh yes, and the same import option has been added to Motion as well. You can find any and all images that you have generated in the Image Playground app in your Applications folder, should you want to use them again, or you can even go in and edit the images after the fact and save to the old or to a new image. Cool. I suppose this could prove to be useful when in need of a particular object to punch up some graphics, or maybe for a placeholder. So, as limited and unpredictable as the whole thing may seem, there's certainly some potential, and I'm very curious to see what clever things people come up with using it. And there you go, movable markers, new titles, Image Playground. What's your favorite? Have you come up with a really unique and useful way of using Image Playground that I haven't thought of? Then let me know down in the comments. I'm sure there are some interesting ways of putting it to work. That's it for me. If you liked what you saw, would like to help the channel, and be notified when my next video comes out, you know the drill. Like with the button below and subscribe with the button over here. It's very much appreciated. Until then, maybe check out my very comprehensive video on the magnetic mask here, or even this one covering some other amazing new workflow improvements. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching and take care.